These are the 13 films that collectively lost Hollywood over $150 million in a single year and fundamentally changed how movies get made. 1981 wasn't just a bad year at the box office, it was the year that sparked the end of director-driven filmmaking forever. Raiders of the Lost Ark proved blockbusters could dominate, but a parallel story unfolded as legendary studios collapsed, Oscar winners became punchlines, and careers were destroyed overnight. What follows is what happened when Hollywood's biggest bets went catastrophically wrong. Ragtime was the disaster that proved even Oscar-winning directors couldn't guarantee returns has to come first. Milos Forman had won the Academy Award for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and producer Dino De Laurentiis gave him $32 million to adapt E.L. Doctorow's acclaimed novel about racial tensions in early 20th century America. What they got back was nearly $15 million at the box office. Robert Altman was originally attached to direct before creative differences pushed him out, and Forman inherited a production already plagued by uncertainty. The ensemble cast assembled for this epic included Howard E. Rollins Jr., Mary Steenburgen, Elizabeth McGovern, Brad Dourif, Mandy Patinkin, and most notably, James Cagney in his first film role after 20 years of retirement. Cagney's return generated enormous publicity, with the 81-year-old legend coming back to play Police Commissioner Rhinelander Waldo. His health was fragile, and the production worked around his limitations, but his presence raised expectations the film ultimately couldn't meet. 8 Academy Award nominations came in, including Best Supporting Actor for Rollins and Best Supporting Actress for McGovern. The film won nothing. Critics were divided, with some praising Forman's ambition, while others found the sprawling narrative unfocused. Vincent Canby called it sorrowful, funny, and beautiful, while noting the emotional distance created by Forman's choices. The problem was simple mathematics. $32 million required returns that a nearly 3-hour period drama about American racism was never going to achieve in 1981. Adjusted for prints and advertising, the break-even point was somewhere around $70 million, a figure completely unrealistic for the material. Howard E. Rollins Jr. delivered a breakthrough performance that launched his career, leading to television's In the Heat of the Night series. Elizabeth McGovern became a star. The film also featured early appearances by Jeff Daniels in his film debut, Samuel L. Jackson, and Fran Drescher. Cagney received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Film Institute that same year, and Ragtime became his final screen appearance. The film found respectful reviews but empty theaters, proving that prestige, legendary talent, and Oscar nominations meant nothing if audiences weren't buying tickets. Gene Siskel chose it as the best film of 1981, yet it still lost approximately $17 million. For better or worse, Ragtime represented the kind of ambitious literary adaptation that Hollywood was about to abandon. Inchon claimed the title of Most Expensive Disaster. Sun Myung Moon's Unification Church funded this Korean War epic at a staggering $46 million, with another $11 million poured into marketing, and it earned barely $5.2 million worldwide. The Guinness Book of World Records officially recognized it as the biggest money loser in film history at that time. Terrence Young, director of 3 James Bond films, cast 72-year-old Laurence Olivier as General Douglas MacArthur for $1 million plus $50,000 per day of overtime. When asked why he took the role, Olivier gave a characteristically blunt answer, explaining it was money, dear boy, that he had nothing to leave his family but what he could make from films, and that nothing was beneath him if it paid well. Trouble plagued the production from day one. Psychic Gene Dixon was actually consulted to communicate with MacArthur's spirit, who allegedly endorsed the project. Actor David Janssen passed during filming, and a typhoon destroyed sets. During the Inchon landing recreation, ships turned right instead of left due to a miscommunication, a mistake that cost $500,000, and visible cardboard cutouts with strings stood in for actual aircraft. Vincent Canby called it the most expensive B-movie ever made. The very first Golden Raspberry Awards swept Inchon with wins for Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actor for Olivier, and Worst Screenplay. A 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and no home video release meant you could only see it through rare television broadcasts. Oscar-winning director John Schlesinger made Midnight Cowboy, proving he knew how to craft a film. And that's when he created what was then the most expensive comedy ever produced, only for it to be pulled from theaters after just 1 week. Honky Tonk Freeway started as a $2 to $3 million concept ballooned to $24 million by the time cameras stopped rolling. with another $5 million spent on marketing. August 21, 1981 brought the opening, which grossed $939,423 in its first weekend before being immediately yanked from distribution. That opening weekend total represented 100% of its theatrical earnings. The ensemble cast was packed with talent, including William Devane, Beau Bridges, Beverly D'Angelo, Terry Garr, Howard Hesseman, Geraldine Page, Jessica Tandy, Hume Cronin, Daniel Stern, and young Peter Billingsley, who would later star in A Christmas Story. The satirical plot followed travelers converging on a Florida town whose corrupt mayor paints everything pink and dynamites a bridge to attract tourists. At the final screening, Universal executives reportedly stood up and began screaming at Schlesinger, accusing him of making something anti-American and anti-religious. Janet Maslin wrote that John Schlesinger apparently thought America was a crass, foolish, disagreeable place. Rolling Stone documented the $22 million loss in December 1981, and Schlesinger defended the film until his passing, insisting it was the funniest movie he ever made. The disaster effectively ended British company Thorn EMI's American film ambitions. Sometimes a film's biggest enemy is its own marketing department. $18 million went into producing The Legend of the Lone Ranger, with another $10 million spent on prints and advertising, and it earned $12.6 million domestically for an approximate $11 million loss. The financial damage was almost secondary to the public relations nightmare that preceded it. Producers made the inexplicable decision to sue Clayton Moore, the beloved television Lone Ranger who was then in his 60s and still making public appearances in the iconic mask, forcing him to stop wearing it. The resulting public outrage generated far more attention than the actual movie. Gene Siskel predicted the film's legacy wouldn't be who was that masked man, but rather who played him. Unknown lead Clinton Spilsbury proved so problematic that his entire performance had to be dubbed by James Keach. Co-star Christopher Lloyd recalled that Spilsbury came onto set acting like he was already a movie star, calling it a problem from beginning to end. Reports indicate Spilsbury engaged in fistfights on set and refused all publicity. Country star Merle Haggard appeared as a ballad narrator, a choice universally criticized as absolutely awful, and the hero didn't even appear in his mask until an hour into the runtime. June brought Raiders of the Lost Ark just 3 weeks later, which meant the Lone Ranger never stood a chance. Spilsbury won the first ever Golden Raspberry for Worst New Star and never acted again, later working as a photographer. Clayton Moore was finally allowed to wear his mask again in 1984 after the lawsuit was dropped. Steve Martin had just scored huge with The Jerk, and audiences loved him as a comedian, which is why MGM's decision to make Pennies from Heaven seems so baffling. $22 million went into a Depression-era musical drama where characters lip-sync to authentic 1930s recordings while breaking into elaborate fantasy sequences that contrast their bleak lives. $9.17 million came back. Director Herbert Ross adapted Dennis Potter's innovative BBC miniseries, and the tone was relentlessly dark, ending with an execution sequence that blindsided audiences expecting Martin's usual comedy. 8 months of training went into Martin learning tap dancing, while Christopher Walken's stunning bar dance sequence took over 2 months to rehearse. MGM required Potter to rewrite the script 13 times, and Fred Astaire actually tried to block use of his footage from Follow the Fleet. Todd McCarthy in Variety called it one of the most hopelessly esoteric, big-budget Hollywood pictures ever made. Martin himself later acknowledged that you just cannot do a movie like Pennies from Heaven after you have done The Jerk. The film now holds an 83% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and is regarded as an influential cult classic that anticipated dark musicals like Chicago and Moulin Rouge. Pauline Kael called it the most emotional movie musical she had ever seen. Being ahead of your time, it turns out, costs you $13 million. Condorman was Disney's attempt at a superhero comedy and carried a $14 million budget, making it their second most expensive non-animated film at that time, and theatrical rentals returned just $2.5 million. Disney wrote off $9.5 million. Michael Crawford starred as a comic book artist who designs gadgets for his superhero creation and gets recruited by the CIA, while Barbara Carrera played what Disney president Ron Miller called the sexiest character in Disney's history. Oliver Reed reportedly terrorized Carrera on set to elicit more genuine fear reactions. Colin Chilvers, who supervised Superman's effects, joined the production alongside legendary stunt coordinator Remy Julien from James Bond and The Italian Job. but critics still noted visible wires during flying sequences. Siskel and Ebert both gave negative reviews. Disney had actually greenlit a sequel before the first film finished production, and it was immediately canceled after the box office numbers came in. A 27% rating on Rotten Tomatoes tells one story, but the film has developed genuine cult status among Disney fans. Condorman's wings became a power disc in Disney Infinity games, and in 2012, a Marvel editor lobbied to bring the character into the Marvel Universe. Franklin J. Schaffner had made Patton and Planet of the Apes, establishing himself as an A-list filmmaker before Sphinx came along. Between $10 and $14 million went into production, with the tomb set alone running $1 million, and approximately $2 million came back. Leslie Ann Down starred as an Egyptologist discovering a lost royal tomb while being targeted by black marketeers, supported by Frank Langella, Sir John Gielgud, and John Rhys Davies, who would appear as Salah in Raiders of the Lost Ark just 4 months later. Vincent Canby called it total, absolute, utter confusion that never stopped talking and never made a bit of sense, while Variety described it as an embarrassment. Raiders opened in June and permanently defined how archaeological adventures should be made, leaving Sphinx as a cautionary tale about talkie, plotting alternatives. Schaffner's career continued declining from there. Ryan O'Neal starred in the Emerald Heist caper Green Ice that never even reached American theaters. The budget started at approximately £7 million, around $14 million, and reportedly nearly doubled during production before grossing approximately $4 million. O'Neal played an electronics engineer helping socialite Ann Archer execute an elaborate hot air balloon heist of Colombian emeralds controlled by Omar Sharif's villain. Original director Anthony Simmons was fired mid-production and replaced by cinematographer Ernest Day. O'Neal and Archer reportedly could not work together, having very different ideas about what kind of film they were making, and O'Neal almost drowned filming an ocean scene before being rescued by stuntman Vic Armstrong. HBO premiered the film in 1984 instead of theaters. Rolling Stones bassist Bill Wyman composed 18 original songs for the soundtrack. Combined with The Legend of the Lone Ranger and Raise the Titanic, Green Ice contributed to ITC Entertainment's collapse, with the company sold to Canon by 1986. Billy Wilder's final film, Buddy Buddy, arrived with the weight of a legendary career behind it. The same director who made Some Like It Hot and The Apartment, ending with a movie Gene Siskel named the worst film of 1981. Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau reunited for their 6th collaboration in this black comedy adapted from a French farce. $10 million went in, $7.3 million came back, and the approximately $3 million loss paled against the damage to Wilder's legacy. Roger Ebert was devastating in his review, calling the movie appalling, a comedy without any laughs, literally, and using the word incompetent, which he called the saddest word he could think of to describe it. Wilder admitted his mistake, explaining he realized 2 weeks into filming that it did not work to have two comics together, that he needed someone serious like Clint Eastwood instead of a comedian like Matthau. His later reflection was that if he met all his old pictures personified in a crowd, Buddy Buddy he would try to ignore, because it hurts to strike out on your last picture. Matthau's explanation for accepting the role was that he could not say no to Billy and did not want to say no to being in a Billy Wilder picture, but that this was not a Billy Wilder picture. Klaus Kinski, who played a clinic director, later denied being in the film at all. Chevy Chase was coming off Caddyshack, Carrie Fisher was Princess Leia, and this should have worked. $7 million ballooned to $20 million, and box office reports vary between $8.3 million and $18.8 million, with either figure representing a loss. Under the Rainbow, the chaotic comedy was set during the 1938 production of The Wizard of Oz, involving spies, tourists, and 150 little people, actors hired as munchkins, and the film's reliance on height-based humor was widely condemned as offensive. Chase's best friend and National Lampoon co-founder Douglas Kenney had passed in August 1980 after falling from a Hawaiian cliff, and Chase was reportedly in deep depression during filming. Orion considered replacing him with Robert Hayes but decided against it. Shooting ran 20 weeks instead of the planned 12. A 0% on Rotten Tomatoes and nominations for Golden Raspberries for Worst Musical Score and Worst Supporting Actor tell you everything. Carrie Fisher later called it the worst thing she had ever appeared in. Denzel Washington's film debut Carbon Copy came with billing that read, "Introducing Denzel Washington." $6 million produced the comedy, approximately $4 million came back, and the loss landed between $2 and $5 million. George Siegel played a successful executive whose illegitimate black son appears and upends his life, material adapted from Stanley Shapiro's 1970 Broadway play that closed after just 4 performances. RKO Pictures was making its first feature after decades away from production and lacked marketing infrastructure. Critics found the racial comedy tone uncertain, and modern assessments note the film has aged poorly with its race-based humor. CBS pre-purchased television rights for $3 million, which cushioned the loss. Washington showed what critics called decent comedic timing, but the film is largely forgotten today and inadvertently anticipated Trading Places, which handled similar themes far more successfully 2 years later. Brian De Palma's conspiracy thriller Blowout carried an $18 million production budget plus $9 million in marketing, earned $13.7 million, and lost approximately $13 million total. John Travolta played a sound effects technician who accidentally records evidence of a political hit, with John Lithgow co-starring as a chilling villain. The bleak ending alienated audiences who expected Travolta's usual charm from Saturday Night Fever and Grease. Pauline Kael gave an unconditional rave, comparing De Palma to Altman and Coppola, but audiences weren't ready for dark Travolta. The redemption story is worth telling. Blowout is now widely considered De Palma's masterpiece. Quentin Tarantino has named it among his all-time favorites, and Travolta's performance directly influenced his casting in Pulp Fiction. The Criterion Collection release cemented its canonical status, proving commercial failure and artistic success can be 2 completely different things. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi financed the disaster Lion of the Desert at $31 million, with returns of approximately $1.5 million for a loss exceeding $29 million. Anthony Quinn starred as Libyan resistance hero Omar Mukhtar fighting Italian colonization, supported by Oliver Reed and Rod Steiger. Director Mustafa Akkad, who made Halloween, delivered a technically accomplished production that simply found no Western audience. Italy banned the film until 2009, and its political financing made American distribution nearly impossible. Like Inchon, it demonstrated the perils of ideologically driven filmmaking. 1981 changed Hollywood forever. Heaven's Gate ended United Artists. Inchon became the biggest money loser in history. Honky Tonk Freeway was pulled after 1 week, and Billy Wilder's legendary career ended in embarrassment. Over $150 million evaporated in combined losses. Adjusted for inflation, that represents over $500 million in today's money. Studios responded by taking control away from directors permanently, and the auteur era of the 70s that produced The Godfather and Taxi Driver was officially over. The Western genre was considered commercially finished until Dances with Wolves arrived nearly a decade later. High-concept blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark became the only acceptable model. For better or worse, 1981 was the year the money men took over Hollywood, and they have never let go since.